EVs are still much more expensive than petrol cars, but the prices will be driven down, and one of the companies at the forefront of that is MG. The ZS EV was a bargain, and so was the MG5. And now we have a smaller car that's even more reasonably priced. It's called the MG4, and in fact, this could be the best value EV yet. Before I tell you about the MG4 though, please don't forget, if you like this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So this car is a bit of a departure in terms of appearance for MG. You can see it's got a much funkier, more kind of avant-garde look to the front end. And if you follow me around and look at the roof, now this is the top of the range trophy model, so it has this kind of two-tone and has this little spoiler at the back, which looks great, but unfortunately does have a slightly negative impact on range. You also get this light bar at the back, again, much funkier than any MG we've seen before. There are two drivetrains with the MG4 EV, and two trims, but you can only specify 3 combinations. The base SE car sports a 51 kilowatt-hour battery and 125 kilowatt, which is 167 bhp motor. You can also get a long-range version of this trim with a 64 kilowatt-hour battery and 201 brake horsepower motor, which is 150 kilowatts. Then there's the top-end trophy model, which we have here, but you can only get that with the 64 kilowatt-hour battery. One big difference with this car is it's on an all-electric only platform called the modular scalable platform. That means there's no compromise for there being petrol and diesel models of this car at all. Everything is designed around it being electric. The SE trim still includes the MG Pilot safety package, which incorporates adaptive cruise control. There's a 10.25-inch media screen plus support for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You even get access to the iSmart app. The Trophy trim adds a 360-degree parking camera, live services via the iSmart app, wireless mobile phone charging, sat-nav, plus heated front seats and steering wheel. The basic colour is white, and you can also go for blue, black, grey or red, like we have here, for no extra cost. The Trophy also has the option of the fetching orange used in a lot of the first MG press images. That's around £600 extra though. These 17-inch two-tone wheels are common across all cars and every trim level. So this car is about the same size as an ID3 from Volkswagen, although that is a little bit taller. So this car is in that popular class of compact, subcompact, like the ID3, like the Golf. What does that mean for interior space? Well, let's have a look inside and find out. Previous MG EVs looked unexciting on the outside, and although the interiors are perfectly adequate, they weren't that thrilling either. That has changed with the MG4, which is much more compelling. We'll get to the instrumentation a bit later. Generally, everything feels much more up to date. This leather and fabric is specifically for the Trophy edition. So these seats are comfortable enough. There's a decent amount of headroom. I think if you were 6'1", 6'2", you'd be absolutely fine. They're fairly flat in terms of the cushioning, but again pretty comfortable. This Trophy car has electric adjustment of the seats. You can go backwards and forwards, change the back seat back as well, but there doesn't appear to be any lumbar support. We also find these keys a little bit wobbly, which is a little bit Fisher Price. So you'll notice this is very different if you've seen another MG before. The central console is completely redesigned, much less going on, much fewer buttons. This Trophy car has a wireless charging pad for the phone here, a couple of cables here with these slightly weird holes for different types of phone as well. Now if you go down here, there's a couple of cup holders. They've got retention clips, so you can have a variety of cup sizes, but not really large ones. There's actually, I don't know if you can see it, there is a 12 volt car power thing down there, and one USB-C and one USB type A connector. Underneath here is a little bit of space, but you know, it's nice to have this kind of space to be able to move across as well, rather than feeling enclosed, which you know, if this was high, it would feel very enclosed. And finally, if we go back here, there's a small cubby which you can put stuff in, and in front of it there's this, you can maybe put a ticket or some menus or something in there as well. There's a reasonably sized glove compartment here, enough for a plastic bag with something from MG in there, very handy. You could probably put maybe 2 or even 3 sets of gloves in there. So you see the passenger seat has a manual adjustment, and this is what you get in the SE models as well for the driver's seat. So one of the things that MG likes to stress about this car is there's plenty of room for 5 people in the back. We're not entirely sure about this middle seat, but definitely the outer seats have plenty of headroom, and there's a decent amount of knee room as well. So this seat's obviously set up for me. I'm 5'10". If I was a bit taller, there'd still be a decent amount of leg room for someone 5'10" or 6 feet in the back as well. So definitely a car that can get at least 4 adults and probably a 5th one at a pinch as well. One thing that we don't have here though is any kind of armrest. So this middle seat is just a seat. There's nothing to pull down with cup holders or anything. Now there's just one USB port in the back and no vents for air conditioning for rear seat passengers. That's like the VW ID3, but it's still a bit of an omission. Rear seat passengers also benefit from a magazine holder for your kids to put their copies of the MG Classic Car Manual or whatever it is kids read these days. But you also get these 2 extra pockets so they can put their devices up here, which is, we're starting to see this in cars, realization that people will be using phones in the backs of cars. So it's nice to see this. And you get these ISOFIX points for the 2 outer rear seats for putting child car seats in the back. One thing you don't get with this car though is any option to have a sunroof. That was an option with the MG ZS EV long range, and I believe this car can have a sunroof in some other regions, but that's not coming to the UK apparently. So this car is in the same class as the Volkswagen ID3 or Cupra Born, which are basically the same car. So it's a hatchback, and this is 363 litres, which is actually a little bit less than those cars offer. There is some space under here, which as you can see is just about enough to put some charging cables and some extra emergency kit there. Now, if we take this off, which is not incredibly easy, but easy enough, take that off. So if you put the rear seats forward, the usual 60-40 arrangement there. This is, there's a bag in the way, which is why that's not landing flat, but this is 1,177 litres, which is again a little bit less than an ID3 or Cupra Born. But if there wasn't that bag in the way, this would be virtually flat, and no lip here as well, which is one of the things that people criticise the MG5 estate car for. So you can get an item in here pretty easily, roll something in. You know, not a huge boot, but certainly a very usable space. There is one hook on the side here for putting a bag on, but not on the other side. And when you do put the seats back up again, you have to grab a hold of the seat belt because there's nothing to stop it from getting in the way. Until the long range versions of MG's cars came along, range was a problem with their vehicles. This isn't a problem so much with this particular car, even in the small battery form. The 51 kilowatt hour battery has 218 miles of range, which is actually a bit more than Stellantis cars like the Corsa E from Vauxhall or the Peugeot E208. If you step up to that 64 kilowatt hour battery though, you get 280 miles of range with the SE trim, and 270 with the trophy trim, which, you know, this bit on the top here and some other things, the fact that it's apparently a bit heavier reduces that a bit, but that's still very competitive. That's up there with things like the Hyundai Kona, the Kia e-Niro, or Niro EV as it's now called. So for charging, you have a typical CCS port. You've got AC charging at 7 kilowatt hours, which takes about 9 hours with a larger battery, and DC charging goes all the way up to 135 kilowatts, which means it takes about 39 minutes to charge the battery from 10 to 80%, which is excellent. Apparently these cars also support vehicle to load, which means you can actually output from this port as well. We don't have the adapter to demonstrate that though, I'm afraid. Either way, there's plenty of range for longer trips, particularly with that 64 kilowatt hour version, and it's getting about 4.4 miles to the kilowatt hour, which means that it's not that expensive to run. If you do manage to still have a 29p per kilowatt hour supply, that equates to about 6.6p a mile. Obviously that's going to go up soon with the energy price increases. So interior controls, as we mentioned earlier, are relatively uncluttered, so you get a delectably angular steering wheel, nice firm feeling to it. These controls, this is a custom control, but the rest of this is, there's voice control, that's to do with the adaptive cruise. On the right hand side is more media related controls. Now one thing we would like to mention is that there are some things that don't seem to be very easy to find, like for example changing the power of the car. You have to actually deliberately assign it to one of these buttons. You do get stalks for the lights, and there's one for the windscreen wipers here. So one thing that has been very much modernised is the instrument binnacle. You can see here it's completely digital. It's a 7-inch screen. You've got the speed in the middle. You've got some ADAS information on the left-hand side, and this would actually be a trip meter, though currently you've got a door open, so we can't actually see what's going on there. And you also got other stuff ranging around, like range at the bottom, and you know, the regeneration level. Actually next to that is a small thing that saying 0 power right now, but that will give you how much power or regen you're getting as you drive along. You actually start this car just by pressing the, you can hear it dinging there, that's the system coming on because you just press the brake pedal like a Tesla, and then you just leave and lock the car. You don't need to turn it off and on. So that's one thing that's very different. A lot fewer buttons here, so you can see that this knob here is for selecting drive, reverse, neutral and park in the middle, and there's a separate parking brake, but you don't really need to touch that. There is no particular switch, as we said, for selecting the power mode, which we think is a bit of an omission, and there's no switch specifically for changing the regen level either. You have to assign those to buttons on the steering wheel. So there are some controls here for the air conditioning. You've got demisting for front and rear, and you can turn the air conditioning on and off. However, if you actually want to make any adjustments, and again, we like to have at least a few air conditioning controls and physical buttons, you press this and you can see it comes up there with a touchscreen display. If you turn it on, the fan goes on, there's presets there. Turn it off, turn it on. Eco mode, heated steering wheel, heated seats. So this 10.25 inch screen is common across all cars. Now you do get navigation with the trophy car. You don't get this with the SE. You'll have to use another feature, which is the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto for that. But a lot of people prefer that anyway. So you have these 4 different panels. You've got weather, battery. This tells you what radio station you're on. The navigation there. If you go into the car settings, reasonably well designed. You can actually, this is where you actually assign. So if I change that to drive modes, and the right hand is for AC, so you can see if I press the button, that kind of gives you control over the AC. You can configure what those buttons do, change how the lighting behaves, the safety settings, a few things there. This kind of just gives you a few things about MG Pilot that you can change, for example, the alerts for front collision assist there, for example, drive assist system, how it actually operates, and the basic driving modes we started at. We switch it into sport mode there, for example, and this is where you change the energy recovery mode, the regen braking. One thing we should also mention about this car is that you do get an app, the iSmart app, with every car, but with the Trophy you get more live features like weather and connected radio playing as well. So these cars in terms of performance are pretty much average when it comes to cars in this class. The basic SE short range car with a 51 kilowatt hour battery has 125 kilowatts of power, which is about 167 bhp. That's enough to propel the car to 62 miles per hour in 7.7 seconds. Now if you go for the longer range cars, you get a bit more power, 150 kilowatts, which is about 201 brake horsepower, but because they're heavier, they don't accelerate quite so fast. So it's 62 miles per hour in 7.9 seconds for those cars. But that's still maybe a little bit slower than the basic Pro Performance ID3 or a Cupra Born, but a little bit faster than a lot of the Stellantis cars with a 50 kilowatt hour battery. So with that new MSP platform, because the batteries are low, they've positioned them precisely to get a 50-50 weight distribution. This is also a rear-wheel drive car. They will have an all-wheel drive version coming, which we'll talk about in a second. But with this rear-wheel drive car, that weight distribution means it handles really quite well. This car is much more fun than any MG we've had before. You really want to drive it briskly around us, particularly around these kind of country roads that we're on at the moment. As we mentioned before, there are 4 regen modes. There's medium, low, strong and adaptive, and if you set it on the strong mode you can get close to single pedal driving. Now you do need to have a dab of the brake pedal to engage auto hold, which is similar to the way Mercedes work as well. So one exciting thing that MG announced when they introduced this car to us today was the fact that there are 2 further cars coming in the future, one with a bigger 77 kilowatt hour battery, which will give 329 miles of range approximately. That's up there with the bigger battery version of the ID3, and certainly a really leading amount of range. Even more exciting though, for those of us who've been waiting for an electric hot hatch, is the dual motor version of this car, which will have allegedly 330 kilowatts, which is 440 brake horsepower approximately. That's going to be bonkers. It's going to have a 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. They said about 3.7 seconds. It's going to have the 64 kilowatt hour battery and have about 250 miles of range as well. So that car could be incredibly fun, and certainly really lives up to the MG brand of old, which is, you know, considered to be associated with sportiness. So with that longer range on this car already though, this car is definitely very usable for long drives. The comfort is decent. You know, the ride quality is probably not up there with something like an air suspension on a Tesla Model S or a Mercedes with air suspension. But you know, we're driving on some pretty bumpy roads here out in the country in Oxfordshire, and it's handling them pretty well. It's comfortable enough. Also, these seats are going to be perfectly adequate for a longer drive on a motorway too. When you're on a motorway with the long range cars, they also have this kind of aero vent that will change shape to improve the range of the car as well. So the basic safety features delivered by MG Pilot are generous, with things like active emergency braking, which is obviously an absolute necessity for a good NCAP rating these days. You've got pedestrian and bicycle detection for driving around town. And when you're on the motorway, you've got lane keep assist with lane departure warning. You've also got traffic jam assist with intelligent speed limit assist. You've also got intelligent high beam assist, and of course that adaptive cruise control, which is a great feature having across all the cars in the range. And of course, we mustn't forget that all important driver attention alert. And if you move up from the SE to the trophy trim, you get blind spot detection. You get lane change assist and rear cross traffic alert. And not forgetting the door opening warning. And then of course, you've got that 360-degree parking camera that we mentioned before. So now we get to the MG4's headline act, the price. The base SE version is a fiver under £26,000. That undercuts the Stellantis equivalents by over 3 grand. The SE long range is still reasonable at 28,495. And that's sure to tempt over some potential Vauxhall and Peugeot buyers because of this car's much better range. The Trophy is a less reasonable but still good 31,495. But you're still going to be paying over 4 grand more for a Hyundai Kona with just that little bit more range. It's worth noting that now the government grant has gone, these are real prices. They're not being helped by any kind of additional benefit. So while there were 26 grand in the past, these had a 3 grand discount, which you can't get now. We don't know the insurance groups for this car yet, but one thing that MG did stress was high residual values. They said at least 60% and a little bit more than 60% for the SE long range and Trophy long range. Now, what that means is that the lease costs of this car are going to be pretty competitive. They talked about 300 quid for the basic car, 350 for the SE long range, and then 410 for the Trophy long range. Now, these are all much less than equivalent cars. For example, the ID3 is going to cost at least 150 quid more. MG warranties are now on a par with the Koreans. The basic warranty is 7 years or 80,000 miles. So overall then, the MG4 absolutely dominates on value. It beats anything from Kia, Hyundai or Stellantis, and absolutely trounces the current prices of the VW ID3 or Cupra Born. So let's just take a look at that 360-degree parking camera. You can see you get a top view from over there, you get a kind of sensor view, and obviously the rear view camera. It certainly makes reversing a little bit easier. I nearly hit a tree. As you can see, the sensors definitely work. So the MG4 EV is incredible value, but it's not cheap and nasty in any way. Yes, there are some rough edges, and the boot space is merely average in its class, but it fulfills exactly what we hoped for when we heard this car was coming. The range is great, the driving very comfortable, and the equipment level very good for the price. The MG4 EV sets a new benchmark for electric value. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel.